why now is the best time to make millions with cryptos, even with a small bankroll and even if you know nothing about technology. Let me put it bluntly, the rise of cryptocurrencies is by far the biggest wealth generation opportunity of your lifetime. Now, if we look back, cryptocurrencies were already the fastest growing asset class of the last decade. We went from less than $500 million at the end of 2012 to 2.77 trillion in 2022. That's a compound annual growth rate of 150%. This growth rate makes crypto assets the highest earning investment in history. And if you look at this table here, you see a comparison of Bitcoin to gold as a representative for hard assets and the S&P 500, the general stock market, as a representative for stocks. And what you can see here, no matter what time frame you compare, anywhere from the last 2 years to the last 10 years in this table, you see in this brown yellowish color Bitcoin, and then at the bottom in really small bars you see gold and the stock market. So the comparison is not even close. Bitcoin outperformed everything else that's out there in the market by a huge margin. So after a decade of rapid growth, how many people are using cryptos today? Based on monthly active users, my best guess is there are about 60 million DeFi users right now. In total, there are around 290 million people that have some exposure to the crypto market. And this is based on verified identities at centralized crypto exchanges. So not necessarily even these 290 million are all active or invested today, but give or take 290 million people that have some exposure to cryptocurrencies. But there are 7.95 billion people on the planet. So crypto only really has a 3.64% adoption worldwide. And it's much less than even 1% adoption among institutions and nation states. So now let me talk about why crypto will continue to be the fastest growing asset class during the 2020s. We have a rapidly growing foundation. If we look at internet usage worldwide, in 2022, there were 4.95 billion internet users, and that's really only just 62% of the global population. So there are about 210 million new internet users added every single year, and this growth is actually accelerating. That means we have at least 14 more years of massive growth ahead of us just on the population of internet users worldwide. Plus, there are hundreds of billions of Internet of Things users, like smart devices, sensors, vehicles. More and more things go online these days and get connected to the internet. So this leads to exponential growth of data. You can see here on this chart, we're just in the sweet spot right now where things will really start to take off over the next few years. But let me get back to cryptos now. The internet users are just the foundations for what's going to happen. So the internet users are growing, but now we're going to look at the super cycle of the 2020s when it comes to cryptos. Because we have a growth cycle on top of a growth cycle. And I call this the Genesis cycle. Because once adoption of a technology hits about 10%, something really, really powerful happens and this Genesis cycle takes hold. As an example, I'm going through a few different technologies to show you that this is a universal thing that happens with every single technology. We have an early adopter phase until we get to the 10%, and then we have a mainstream adoption phase where the largest chunk of growth is happening, and then of course we always have like the laggards that come later, the maturity phase, where the remaining 10% come. So here in this example, we have cars in the US. You see it took about 14 years to hit this 10% inflection point. And once this inflection point was hit, we have the Genesis cycle. And then over the following 14 years, we got all the way up to 90% adoption. If we look at mobile phones, exactly the same thing is happening. You can see here it started in the early 80s. It took, in this case, also 14 years to hit the magical 10%. And then boom, Genesis cycle. And over the next 14 years, we got all the way up to 90% and saw massive, massive growth. If we look at broadband internet, we'll see already things are speeding up now. Broadband internet started in the early 90s, and after 8 years, we hit 10%, the inflection point where the Genesis cycle starts. And then over the following 8 years, we had this big run up to 90%. So as an investor, clearly where you want to get into something is when the Genesis cycle starts. Once we hit this critical 10% inflection point, this is where you get in. This is where the hyper growth phase comes in. And just to give you an example, one more example, how you can see how this is really completely universal no matter what technology we talk about. Even flush toilets follow this technology adoption S-curve, where in this case, in 1875, it started, it took about 50 years back then to get to 10% inflection. But even in this really long, slow, drawn out timeline, once it hit this 10% inflection point, over the following 50 years, got all the way up to 90%. So if we're looking at Bitcoin as a representative for the crypto market, we see Bitcoin started really in 2010, where we had the first exchanges where it really started trading. And then over 10 years now in the US or in developed markets in general, it's not just the US, you can also say the same for Central Europe, probably for Australia too, for the developed countries. We're now at this magical 10% mark where we hit the Genesis cycle. So over the next few years, there is no better place in the world to be invested in than cryptocurrencies. This is where the biggest move will happen now in monetary terms, in percentage terms, where the most amount of wealth will be created over the coming few years when we get the majority exposure over the majority of this Genesis cycle. This is where ridiculous wealth will be generated, and where we go from 10% to all the way up to 90% to billions of users just over the next few years. You see here a projected curve. This is from Cambridge. To see how we get to 5.2 billion crypto wallets over the coming years. So thanks to this super cycle, crypto adoption is growing at twice the speed of internet adoption. We saw when we look back to the flush toilets, it took 50 years to get to the 10% and then another 50 years. And we see with cars it was faster, with the internet it sped up already, but now with cryptos we're seeing something that we have not seen before because the timeline is compressing. Everything is happening faster now, and so it's happening at even twice the speed of internet adoption. So it might not even take all the way to 2030. We might really be looking just at the next 3 to 6 years, give or take, where the majority of this Genesis cycle will happen. So this is why this is by far the biggest opportunity, not just in many, many years, but quite literally, it sounds so cliche, but it's absolutely true, quite literally of your lifetime. There's never going to be something as significant, a wealth generation event as significant as this Genesis cycle in crypto that is now coming up. This makes crypto not only the biggest money-making opportunity in the world right now, but also the fastest. There is no other way where you can make wealth, where you can make money faster than in cryptos. No other technology in history has seen adoption as fast as crypto. That gets me to the million-dollar question. Why invest right now? The current chaos in financial markets worldwide is delivering you the best entry price of the decade. So we not just have the fastest and biggest wealth generation opportunity of your lifetime, but right now, with all the chaos in the world right now, we also quite literally have the best entry price of this entire decade of the 2020s. We have just seen the biggest deleveraging event in the history of the crypto markets. The total crypto market capitalization went from $2.77 trillion all the way down to $986 billion. We had the famous or infamous lunar death spiral where $41 billion were evaporated almost overnight in a span of like 2 or 3 days. We had the largest crypto hedge fund, Three Arrows Capital, with way over $10 billion in assets under management, get liquidated by creditors, completely blew up. And then we saw one of the largest crypto borrowing and lending platforms with 1.7 million users and with $11.8 billion in assets under management go bankrupt. So not only is this complete chaos, this contagion event where so much gets liquidated and so much wealth got destroyed, Not only is this the best opportunity in 4 years, because crypto moves up and down more or less in 4-year cycles. So right now, we're not just looking at the best opportunity in 4 years, but right now you have the best entry